I train many different types of people, competitors, not competitors, whatever, many different types of goals. And one thing I've learned is that the usual protein standard does not work for everybody. I know a lot of people talk about using, 1 gram per pound of overall body weight, or 1.5 grams per overall body weight, or 1.5 for pounds of lean mass, and just keeping it there the whole time. Because I've worked with many different people with many different types of situations and body types, that's not always going to work for everybody. In fact, some of the people I have that are working on contest prepping now are on a lower amount of protein than what somebody else may have them on, and it's working really good, and the person's still getting stronger. I've noticed since I've started checking blood glucose and stuff with people over the past 2 or 3 years, you can manipulate that with protein as much as carbohydrates. Maybe not as much, but you can control the speed of digestion of food with the protein. You can make the glucose go down faster. That's my theory on it. But I've noticed if they have high glucose, they don't need a lot of protein because it's just not going to work. I've had some people where to get their glucose down, I've had to lower the protein under 1 gram per pound of lean mass and then slowly work it back up as they get more insulin sensitive and their glucose numbers look better. So I don't do this standard measurement of protein across the board. I first noticed this with myself, and one of the best looks I had was when I was eating only 200 grams. I usually eat 230, 240. How do you determine how much a person needs? I honestly start them out at 1 gram per pound of lean mass, and then watch their glucose and then modify it accordingly as needed. If it needs to go down or go up. And then you have like the carb protein ratio. As you lower carbs, you may need to raise protein depending. Some people you do, some people you don't. There's a lot of factors. I just don't like how some people get set in their head this one standard on everything and apply it to everybody, because that's just not how this works. Especially people with a crappy insulin sensitivity, they're not going to be able to tolerate a bunch of protein. It's not going to work. But if their glucose is high, you can cut it down and be pretty much assured they're not going to lose any muscle mass. This is a different topic, but I used to be totally against training fasted, and there's some people I have that with the way their glucose was, we started training fasted and that started going down. Now, of course, we'll be to a point to where we have to stop doing that. But for this particular scenario, this set of data and what we need to get accomplished, this is the best answer. This is the best solution. Same with the protein. If somebody's got higher glucose, they need to lose weight. We need to speed things up. Maybe fewer meals, more spaced out meals, lower protein. You can compensate the calories with carbohydrates, and unless it affects the glucose. Sometimes I'll tell you, I've seen glucose higher, and then you take like 1 ounce of protein off each meal, and then it'll lower because the carbs are going through faster because the protein's not slowing it down. You digest the carbs, it goes in the bloodstream, and it goes from the bloodstream to where it needs to go. When you do the glucometer, you read it in the bloodstream. And the slower things go, the higher it's going to be, the longer it's going to take for it to lower. So you want to try to speed things up, and then you can also elongate the duration of time in between meals to get it down. But without trying to go too much on a tangent, it's all about protein intake and how I've noticed how to do that. So I've just noticed that lowering protein for some does work, even if it's under the stereotypical standards for what most people would do. Now, how do you know you need to lower it? I just went over that. If you start pulling carbs and it's not moving, try lowering a little bit of protein, just a little, off a few meals, see what happens. And then you'll see it go down, and you'll say, hey, now we can put some back in. Do we need to put carbs in or put protein in? Make an assessment, energy, all this stuff. And usually, Sometimes I'll put carbs back in, and if they don't lose weight, I'll take the carbs out and then increase the protein because I've reset the ratios according to what their glucose is reading now versus what it did 2-3 months ago or 6 months ago. And you determine where to increase the protein. Like if their blood sugar's falling a lot overnight, you can increase it at night when they sleep. That could help. So the whole point of this is don't get stuck in a modern stereotypical way of thinking when troubleshooting people's diets. I do have this saying, I have a step-by-step process of what I like to do, and then when you get towards the end, when you have to take the last little bit off, my last rule is break all the rules, because that's when you start breaking the stereotypical standards because your body's caught on or your body is stubborn and you have to start doing things you haven't done before, of course, to get a result you haven't gotten before for that person. And that doesn't mean you have to do it every single time you diet a competitor down, but for that first time you may have to. So breaking one of those rules, protein intake, is what I did, and it worked. Now, if you lower it and you start getting the hypoglycemic issues, first of all, if you're not diabetic, you're going to be fine. But even though getting the cold sweats, blood sugar and everything probably tells you need to start putting protein back in to keep blood sugar levels stable. So it getting down low and getting to where you're getting hypoglycemic is a sign you may need to add some protein in there, especially if you're dieting. You don't want to risk adding carbs, because sometimes if you just put the carbs in there and you don't change the protein, don't change the speed of digest, you say, okay, well, my blood sugar is low, and you throw a bunch of carbs in there, it'll go up and right back down, and you're back to square one where you started, and your blood sugar is low. So I guess you could say you can manipulate the baseline blood sugar levels by how much protein a person takes in. That's probably a good way to explain all of this I'm trying to say. And if you're dieting, you want to keep it below 90 when you wake up in the morning, usually. Now, here's something different. I've seen people that stay in the 80s no matter what, and they don't lose weight, and their protein's higher, and their carbs are already low, and then I lower the protein, and then it starts coming down. And what I've noticed is, even though it gets through the bloodstream and everywhere pretty fast, where the blood sugar stays low, that doesn't mean they're using all of it. And sometimes you can tell this because the person will be eating a diet that's higher in protein, they're holding water. And sometimes you can lower the protein, and the water will go, because it's spilling over. It's not being used, so it's being turned into glucose, and then if you have enough glucose, it's going to spill over into the skin. That makes sense. And then you're like, okay, what's going on? I'm waking up 85, but I'm not losing any weight. Everything's in check. Try a couple ounces of protein down. You don't have to worry about it getting too low until the person wakes up 70s. Okay, that's my opinion. This isn't medical advice or anything. I'm just telling you my personal experiences, for your all's entertainment. But that's what I have noticed. So sometimes it still needs to be lower. I usually only raise it if they wake up below 80. That's the time where it needs to be raised up, or gets close. But you can always try and take it back to where it went. I think if you can handle higher protein and diet down, that's the way to go, and save lowering the protein for the very end if you need to do it. So on high carb days, I lower the protein down to 1 gram per pound of lean mass. Because I do want the food to digest fast, and I want the insulin going up, and I want all that day for recovery, getting the thyroid stimulated, metabolism up, all that good stuff. Getting the cortisol down, all that stuff. If they can't do a lot of protein and they can't do a lot of carbs, but you need calories in there to keep things from getting too low, use healthy fats. Use the macadamia oil. Everybody knows I'm big on the species shit, so that's what I use. So use that to fill in some of the gaps. Use vegetables in there as a filler, and there you go. But over time, if you keep eating consistently and training, your protein requirements are going to change. And so you have to keep an eye on that. For somebody that does this consistently all the time. So yeah, don't get stuck in the stereotypical protein amounts, because I've seen people that can go under 1 gram per pound of lean mass and be just fine, not lose any muscle, and lose fat. I've seen people that can eat a lot of protein and lose fat. It just depends on the metabolism and their insulin sensitivity. And I do believe using the glucometer and weight and looking at how they look with the water retention, all that stuff, you can actually manipulate their protein like you can carbs or fats to get them to lose the body fat. People think the protein's always the standard one. Once it's there, it's there. That's not always true. I don't think that. I do think it needs to change. I do think there's times in the diet where it needs to change, or when you cycle carbs, it needs to change. So for me, it's not a constant variable. But if something's not there, something else should be there in its place. I will say that. Because you can't eat just little protein, nothing else. I mean, there's a caloric demand too that you have to meet, or else the body starts fighting back if the calories get too low. Which is why I go back to saying the fats can work good for that if the carbs doesn't work good for that. So I think I got my point across.